Good morning, Metalheads here, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown! And today, we're looking at the latest album from Cave In, entitled Final Transmission. Cave In, an American band, and another project from Mr. Stephen Brodsky of Mutoid Man, Kid Kilowatt, New Idea Society. He also performed on Converge's third album, When Forever Comes Crashing. He's also done some solo albums, one of which I reviewed back in April, a record he did with Marissa Nadler entitled Drone Flower. Definitely a pivotal figure in the world of underground rock and heavy metal music. I mean, he's done so many projects that honestly, it's hard to keep track of them all, and that's unfortunately where Cave In falls for me personally. I mean, their last album was released in 2011, and this was pretty much right around the time I was starting to get into more extreme stuff, so a band like Cave In wouldn't have been on my radar. And by the time they would have been on my radar, it's too late. They're already off the radar completely. And that's why initially I was actually quite excited for this album. I mean, this was for a long time his main project. Their first album came out in 1998, right around the time Steven would have been performing with Converge. And Steven's a talented guy. I mean, if you've listened to any of his material, you know that he consistently brings 100% energy and power to the fucking table. But none of that alone is what makes this album special. What makes this album special is Mr. Caleb Scofield. He's been a pivotal occurring figure in the world of underground metal, not quite to the extent of Steven, I would say, but he's got a pretty respectable career under his belt. I mean, he's performed on all of Cave In's work. He's also got his own project, Old Man Gloom, who have created some really interesting material. And Final Transmission contains the last recordings from Caleb, as unfortunately he passed away on March 28th last year. And I remember when he passed away too, because I remember seeing a lot of tributes, I remember seeing a lot of people posting photos and all that such, and yeah, I mean, it's always sad when someone so young and talented passes away, you know? And even more sad that he didn't get to see, you know, his baby and their final album come to form. With that in mind, it goes without saying that there are a lot of emotions flowing in and out of this record at all times. Cave In have spent the last year fine-tuning this record, making it as honest and emotional as possible without seeming overbearing, without detracting from the fact that it is a Cave In album. The album has a real emotional core to it. As far as I know, none of these songs are directly about Caleb. It seems as though Caleb was still very much a part of the album's writing process, but that being said, the emotions surrounding his death, the love that all of these guys clearly had from him, it's felt through all of the music. And it hits you right away, too, with that opening track, Final Transmission, which actually contains an original demo that Caleb recorded for this album. A very somber and raw and honest acoustic guitar riff and doodle, transitioning wonderfully into All Illusion, a big, moody, alt-rock tinged kind of post-rock drawl. Emotional, hefty, it reminds me of some of the more melodramatic material out of 90s alternative rock and grunge, obviously with that modern alt-metal edge, that modern post-rock edge. Steven sounds great here and on the rest of the record as well. I'm used to hearing a more optimistic and wide-eyed Steven because of Mutoid Man. I'm not used to hearing him play this more moody and, for lack of a better word, depressing material, but he really sells it. You can really hear the pain and the sadness in his voice. I mean, there's light at the end of the tunnel, you know, there's still energy to be found within the music, within the musicianship, but Steven sounds tortured, man. He sounds like this really fucked him up. And in the album's most grandiose and dramatic moments, it's not just Steven who sounds torn up about this, the band does as well. Take, for instance, on a song like Winter Window, one of the most powerful tracks on the record, with its swelling keyboards and its pulsating guitars. The song continues to grow and build with acoustic rhythm guitars and some dynamic twin guitar leads, but it still feels really somber. It weirdly hits a lot of the notes of a minimalistic Mastodon or Baroness. Even the faster and more aggressive cuts on the records, take for instance Nightcrawler and Leads of the Wolves, are still really powerful and emotional centerpieces, with the latter track in particular taking real advantage of that aggression, of that anger, and just allowing Cave In to really open themselves up and let everything they're feeling out. It's so open and honest. It's kind of like you're taking a peek into this really chaotic group therapy session. It actually reminds me a lot of the recent Pelican record that I just reviewed. It hits a lot of the same sonic and tonal notes that made that record so powerful. It has the same kind of tragic emotional core that made it so devastating. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't rise quite to those heights, and it's not really anyone's fault per se. I just don't think that some of the songs are super engaging. A song like Shake My Blood, for instance, doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's by no means a badly performed or written song. It's just not as interesting and engaging and powerful as something like Winter Window or Led to the Wolves. Same with a song like Lanterna, which I think has a really nice chorus, but not really a whole lot else going for it. And then there's also the fact that you really can't listen to this as a standalone album. You can't simply play this and then chill out to it. It's impossible. The emotional core, the narrative, the history of Cave In is so intricately tied to every piece of music on here. It's just impossible. Which is not a bad thing, not inherently at least. In fact, I still think the emotional core is the best thing about the record. But it does mean that if you're not familiar with Caleb, and if you're especially not familiar with Cave In, I don't know if you'd really get a lot out of this. Especially when, by sheer coincidence, Plotkin just released an album that hits a lot of those same notes and, frankly, does it better. Again, none of these things are Cave In's fault, especially not the awful timing of Nighttime Stories. That's pure coincidence, nothing we can do about that. But they are things that you take into consideration. So in the end, I'm going to give this thing a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's a really solid record, maybe not the most well-balanced, but definitely still a very emotional and interesting and powerful record. In its best moments, it really does wrap you up in these tragic and dynamic moments of Cave In's life. It's just that those best moments, in my opinion, don't account for the entire record. It goes without saying that if you know Caleb or you love Cave In, this is a record you're going to need to check out if you haven't already. A lot of people have been talking about this album, so there's a good chance if you already know who Cave In is, you already kind of know what you're getting into, you've already listened to this, you've already had your experience, you've already made up your mind, and more power to you, buddy. More fucking power to you. But if you're coming into this brand new, I wouldn't say to actively avoid it, but don't expect to get the same experience that a lot of other people are having with this record, because you won't really get that. You just won't. Unfortunately, Final Transmission just doesn't necessarily work well enough as a standalone album. Compare that to something like Behemoth's The Satanist, which is revered for its emotional core, but also has really engaging and powerful music all the way through. To be fair, that album kind of has a natural advantage by being a more confident and aggressive style inherently, but nonetheless. I still really enjoyed this album. I still got a lot out of it. It's going to be a big, emotional, cathartic moment for the band and for the fans, and for that reason, it'll probably show up on a lot of Album of the Year lists. I can kind of see that already. For myself, 3.5 out of 5, a flawed but really powerful and effective record. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this album? Do you not like this album? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.